Agreement.
I was
All
really
right.
just all sit there and stare at the camera.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
no.
awkward. This
Yeah.
is not the way it's supposed to be. Hello and welcome to another edition of Black Hills Information Security, talking about news. In this episode, hopefully I'm reading the right show notes this week. We're going to be talking about the NSO 0 day. We're going to be talking about malware hiding in Windows subsystem for Linux, which I think is weird because we've been using it for years now, since it literally just came out. And there's some more ransomware type things that we just can't get away from, because that's what this show becomes, honestly. So sit tight, buckle in, and let's get started with BHIS. All right. So do we want to jump right into the NSO thing? Because that's literally what we were just talking about.
Sure, did it.
All right, let's go in. So this NSO 0 day has been out for a while. Noah, you were talking about it. I think it was a couple of weeks ago that it was discovered, and Apple finally released the patch for the 0 day. And I think that there's a lot of interesting things about this, right? You have hot nation state on nation state 0 day action. You have an entire market available for that. And what are the ethics around that? You have the actual kind of business plan. If you're somebody like NSO Group, and actually writing 0 days from things, it is a really tough business plan, mainly because you're constantly running into this game of having to come out with additional 0 days. And then there's also the ethics of, a nation state or somebody, let's say law enforcement, having access to 0 days. What does that do for privacy and rights, not just in one country, but in all of them? So I think it's a really nuanced kind of approach. So Noah, do you want to start talking about this? Because you said that you've been watching this now for a couple of weeks. What has kind of been the evolution that you've seen as far as the news cycles over the past, I think it's been like 8-10 days since this initially was released to the public that NSO had this?
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing that I was kind of talking about as we were starting here, is I was like, am I missing something? The actual forced entry article from Citizen Lab was published on September 13th. And the patch for the hold on a second here. The Darknet Diaries episode, the actual Citizen Lab one was published on September 17th or September 13th, but August 31st there was a Darknet Diaries episode on this. It just seems like the news cycle has been going really kind of slow, and I was trying to figure out the timelines because it wasn't all quite lining up. Obviously, given the fact that I still don't have a full handle on it, but it's been moving recently now that it's become more public, and of course now we have a patch from Apple, so it's becoming more known to the public about that too. But it's just really interesting on that whole timeline of things, especially because the Darknet Diaries episode is dropping so much earlier. But yeah.
Well, I do know that Jack puts a lot of time in Darknet Diaries episode. It's not something that's just like this that you run to market as quickly as possible. He puts a tremendous amount of editing into it. So,
right.
He's had that story for, I would say, for at least at the very minimum a week, maybe a little bit longer. Whenever you look into kind of how Darknet Diaries episodes are released at all.
Yeah, I would say, probably the week of the 16th or something even of August. I'm like, so now we're talking about it now, but it's been kind of known in certain circles for a while, it seems like.
Yeah. And it's also strange. When was the actual patch was released yesterday? Or no, last week.
Last week
is when all the patches came out.
So we had the news 2 weeks ago, and then Apple got an actual update out last week. That's a lot of time where this thing was floating around. What I find is interesting is it doesn't appear that anybody reverse engineered this and added it to Metasploit in that time frame, which is kind of interesting. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, well, this is a pretty advanced attack, right? So there's a couple things here, right? This is, like you said, hot nation on nation state attack here, right? So pretty sexy and probably very specific to who's going to be able to use this, as opposed to a Metasploit module, right? Also, it's in the iOS, right? Which mobile attacks are a little bit different. A little, yeah, just a slight bit. I believe the patch was in Apple's like natural life cycle, like their patch. They didn't do like an out of band patch for this, right? So they just tacked it on to the existing patch that was coming out for iOS 14, right? But yeah, it was coming. It's probably been in use in the wild for a while, though. Let's be real, right?
Well, and there's been a number of articles that reporters have come forward who have actually been breached by this, which I think is interesting. A lot of the people that have been targeted, I believe, by Saudi Arabia is who Citizen Lab first saw evidence of this being used. You have activists in various countries, and then you also have reporters that have come forward and said that they've been compromised with this as well. Now, the reason why I find that interesting is if we go to the nation state on nation state action, that is something that's very, very, very specific. There's lots of organizations that do that. In the United States, there's tons of them that are writing 0 days, and then the government actually uses those as kind of like ammunition in cyberspace. What I find interesting is a lot of these stories that are coming through are activists and reporters, and that's where this starts to get a little bit wonky. It's not a nation state spying on another nation state. You're actually talking about nation states that are actively spying on their citizens in a way that it isn't just cyber criminals or terrorists or anything like that. And I think that that's what kind of terrifies me whenever you start looking at how this is being used and how exploits like this are used whenever they're sold on the open market. It's shady as hell. And it's a very weird place to be.
This is why we need reversible encryption, John. I mean, this just sells that whole story, right?
Yeah, then we don't have to worry about exploits like this anymore, right? And all it takes is one Reality Winter or one Edward Snowden. It's like, that encryption on all your phones, we said the government, you could trust us. Turns out, no. Our bad. So
I think another thing that was an article that was on the list that we didn't talk about last week was kind of bug bounty researchers being disappointed with Apple paying out bug bounties. And it kind of seems like a history of them not paying out as much as other organizations, taking their time to pay them out, maybe like a massive backlog of bugs that hadn't been fixed and patched. So that's kind of like tangential, but like I wonder if that contributes to kind of the slow news cycle for these types of things.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that affect that, but real quick on the bug bounty, like I've talked to people who've been working in Apple's bug bounty. They basically all said it's not very rewarding because the only reason you use the bug bounty is if you were trying to like get reputation, because you can sell those exploits on the open market for way more to people like NSO Group or even like Project 0 Day, than for way more than Apple's willing to pay out for them as well.
Well, I think that gets into a broader problem with the entire 0 day economy or bug bounty economy. Is if you're looking at working with an organization and trying to do responsible disclosure, it's an incredible pain in the ass. We've talked about it on the show before, where you submit something to the vendor comes back to you, says you don't know what you're talking about. You respond back with proof of exploitation, packet captures and everything. They demand more data. Then they call you, once they've confirmed that it's a real exploit, then they call you up and they're like, okay, so how do we fix this? And you're like, well, crap, this just became free consulting. So that's not a good place to be. Plus the whole bug bounty marketplace, a lot of these companies, whenever they have a bug like this that comes up, they'll send you a $100 gift certificate to Chipotle and a t-shirt. So
it's a lot of burritos.
It is a lot. It actually is a lot of burritos. Kind of.
Do they plan ahead and like send you a t-shirt that's like the next size up as well?
Yeah, they actually do. It's just a way to like piss you off. It's like, well, here's your small shirt. I'm not small. I want a large. Here's your extra small shirt. That's you at that point.
John, isn't this pretty much a failed game, though? So think about it this way, right? So not to defend Apple or get into their, like, to think they're doing it right or wrong or whatever, but think about it like this, right? It doesn't matter how much they pay, right? Don't you think there's probably some nation state who's willing to pay a little more, right? And then here comes the other, like, capitalist side is, how much does Apple care about this, right? Like, should they, be investing every dollar they have to, make this security better? And you may say, yes, they should be. Absolutely. They should be out buying everybody. But, it's kind of when it becomes a market and not just, I don't know if they're ever going to win this game. I don't know if they'll ever pay as much as, NSO Group would, or,
Plus, I think that these things have been happening for so long. And they actually have this detailed. David Rice is one of the people that works at Apple's security team, and he wrote the book Geekonomics, kind of a play on words of Freakonomics, but it was basically Geekonomics and the true cost of insecure software. And he works there, right? That's what he does. And his entire book, if you read it, which is a fascinating book, and you should go read it, it's a little bit old, but it's awesome, is basically calculating the costs associated with insecure software and what the overall impact is to an organization. So I guarantee you that they have done the calculation of how much they spend on security to get to a certain level of security that they're comfortable with. Because if something like this happens, this looks like a nation state attack, right? NSO group sells to nation states. They just basically, it's an act of God, install the patch, they move on. Their stock price isn't hit. The users buying their product isn't hit. So they're absolutely doing those calculations. No question whatsoever.
I mean, what else would you buy too? Like, what other cell phone? Like, it's not like we have like 5 different vendors out there that are offering better security too. So, it, as a like that becomes into like a bigger subject. Like, as a consumer, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to get the most secure phone ever, and it's really just some Chinese knockoff that says secure on it, right? So,
I have those conversations. I have those conversations with family members that aren't in the business all the time, where they're like, well, I run Android because it's more secure. And then I had other people like, well, I like Apple because at least they care about security. I'm like, it doesn't quite work that way. But
that's one of the things that I like on the other end of the spectrum, because this is targeting, targeting activists, targeting reporters, and people are like, do I need to worry about Pegasus and the NSO group? No, but it gives an opportunity for people to start having those conversations about mobile device security. You have the general public, like John said, friends and family that are asking about Apple security, iPhone security. You're able to start having those conversations. So this entering that public domain, public knowledge, getting a lot more of those that don't live and die by information security, asking questions about cell phones. It's a great opportunity to have conversations.
I see what you're saying, Alex, but I would also say, I mean, I don't know that those people can say like, I'm not a target of Pegasus possibly, because I mean, there has been talks of NSO group selling to possibly, or at least attempting to sell to police stations. And what if they sold to the Minneapolis police station here not too terribly long ago, and they had that at their disposal, and they said, I've got this person here who I think is causing issues. Let's just push the button. I mean, what's the worst thing? Can you really? Because the whole thing that revolves around this is like any system this good gets abused at some point.
So a couple of things about local law enforcement, right? So we've had a number of cases that have been publicly released where these groups have actually directly sold to local law enforcement. Dirt bags, and stingrays for LTE cell phone interception. Usually that's something that's only available to nation states where you can stand up your own LTE cell tower, and it gives you full interception and tracking capability in something like a Stingray, right? Now, that's usually available to, like I said, military, DoD, IC, but there have been instances where companies have been selling devices like that to local law enforcement. And I know that here in South Dakota with the pipeline protests, those were actually in use where various highway patrol organizations were flying around and intercepting people's cell phone communications. At least that's what's alleged.
Right.
But the problem with that really goes down to, if you're working with the FBI, if you're working with the CIA, if you're working with the NSA, they have very, very clearly defined rules of engagement and what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. They have entire groups of people that are fretting constantly about FISA warrants and all this types of data that they can and cannot intercept, under what circumstances, what locations, and citizens, and Blue Force data, and all that. Whenever you get to local law enforcement, these guys tend to get this equipment, and they're like, well, this is awesome. I can set it up outside my house, and I can, track all this information that's going from my wife's cell phone. Like, that crap happens. So if you have something like NSO that's selling directly to local law enforcement, there is no really nice framework at a national level in the United States that basically governs how they're to use these things short of the Constitution. And most of the time, you wouldn't even know that these things are being utilized by local law enforcement. So I think that there is a problem with these types of things being sold to people that have no right using these things. Another example of it would be law enforcement that has like, armored personnel vehicles that are basically better than what we had in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they're buying those, and they're small towns of 50,000 people in the Midwest. What the living hell are you going to do with that? So there's
serve warrants.
Yeah, serve warrants.
Pulls
A really good friend of mine, he actually did 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. And we were like standing next to some police officers downtown, and they had it out there. And he's like, "What the hell are you doing with that?" And he's like, "Well, you never know, right? Or something like could break out." And he's like, "I've been in war zones, and that's nicer than anything we ever had in a war zone. What are you going to do with that?" Like, well, it looks pretty badass. I mean, really, this gets into arming local police, and I think it touches on that much larger meta issue as well.
We're going to go pit them with this thing. Pit them. You're going to run them over like a goddamn Bigfoot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but no, I think that there is concerns about this, but one of the concerns that, I see in the conversation I wanted to open up to you all is there's people that say, well, the United States government shouldn't be working in exploits in 0 days at all. And I think that that's a crap argument. If the United States government isn't actively buying and developing exploits constantly for everything, then I honestly don't know what the hell my tax dollars are being used for.
Can I get a refund if you guys aren't doing that?
I get a refund. I demand at least 5 exploits per month, U.S. government. Chop, chop.
I mean, I think to some people, like, it's an obvious. You're like, oh yeah, I really hope that the U.S. isn't doing that kind of stuff. That would be terrible.
I really hope they are.
Yeah, but like at the same point, that you live in a fantasy land. If that's what you're saying, I mean, we need that. It's the game. Other countries are playing the game. You either join the game or you get ran over.
Yeah. By the up armored APC that your local.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One way to go.
I only keep 1 bullet in my gun and 1 round in the howitzer. So.
You can just buy the Librem phone with all the physical hardware kill switches for LTE
Oh
data
yes,
and everything.
please. This is just what I've been waiting for. A new phone that's supposedly so secure that it's gonna just. Yeah. Oh god, I can't wait to use the interface. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It goes back to the chocolate thing. It's like, will you give me your password for a bar of chocolate? Hell yes. Here, I give you a completely secure phone. Awesome. How do I play Angry Birds? Oh, you can't. Can I get Snapchat on it? No. I can't
no
TikTok.
What? Huh. Well, I don't. Screw it. I'm going back to my iPhone.
This thing's actually useless to me. Has zero function. I don't want it.
So what can it do? It can make phone calls. Well then that doesn't. What like
that's
I want
not why I buy a cell phone. I don't buy a cell phone to make phone calls.
Why would I buy a cell phone to make phone calls? That's ridiculous.
It's retarded.
Well, I guess we're screwed. I guess that's the message. All right, next story.
That's true.
The message. Real quick, John. Though I mean, we did kind of touch on this. NSO Group's business strategy of having to constantly develop updates, and they sell this Pegasus to their nation states and such, right? The actual exploit was in Apple's iOS 14 Blast Door, which was released in like the end of January this year. So this exploit is relatively fresh anyhow, and it's burned now. So they have to go develop yet another exploit, and this is the challenge that they're fighting over there too.
Well, they don't develop them; they buy them and they resell them, and they make money being the middleman, just like every other large company that I can think of. But
they promise their customers that it always works. And
I'm going to stand up for NSO Group here. They do buy them, yes, but they also have the skills internally to develop them as well.
However they get it.
Yep, they have.
Same with the U.S. government. They develop them, they buy them.
So let me put it this way: imagine your NSO Group and you're buying exploits, right? You're going to need to have the technical capability to actually vet those exploits. But then you also find out that as soon as the doors open in a specific exploit area, if you have your own internal resources that you're paying really well, they can then do follow-on exploits. So I can almost guarantee that they have other exploits in their bag of tricks. But yeah, trust me, they have people that work there that are incredibly solid, amazing security researchers.
Absolutely.
But I guess I was just looking at the turnover. I mean, this, like I said, just came out at the end of January this year, and now they have to find a new one. So,
Yeah.
And one
That's the
final
game.
note on that, the macOS Big Sur also had an update, which seems like it was related to the same exploit as far as I can tell, but that wasn't getting much news. So just if you're a Mac user, update macOS as well. And there's a 10.6. For me, it wasn't showing up for me for a few days, but worst case, you can go to the App Store and get the full installer, and it will update.
well, my understanding is that Blastdoor is in iMessage's messaging like app system,
Yeah.
so that is installed on Mac.
Yeah, and they're trying to break down the barriers between mobile and desktop and laptops as much as possible, which makes sense for them, right? Having a
It's all
unified
ARM.
operating system and only one to maintain is a good thing.
Yeah.
Oops. All right. So let's talk about Windows Subsystem for Linux. I like this particular story because, well,
You like Windows?
I like Windows a lot, right? But
They let in
the
a
thing
lot
that
of light.
gets me is we've been using Windows Subsystem for Linux for malware deployment since about 2016. Like
Not
literally,
according to this article.
like as soon as we
No,
as
it's
soon as
new.
it came out, we're like immediately like, hey, wow, you can hide your malware in there, man. And that's just if you go back and look at sacred cash cow tipping, I think this was in the first sacred cash cow tipping that we did. And there's a number of reasons why Windows Subsystem for Linux is really a good place to put your malware. First and foremost, it's a great place to put your malware because a lot of antivirus engines don't have visibility into it. Now, Windows Defender does. On many installations, if you actually install like Ubuntu or something and then install Metasploit, your AV is going to freak out and start nuking things. You can actually put exceptions to the file that is your Windows Subsystem for Linux for like Ubuntu or Kali. And I do recommend that if you're doing it. But something as simple as like a basic netcat listening backdoor works like an absolute champ and has for a long time. And that worked even with Windows Subsystem for Linux 1. It works even better now with 2. And one of the reasons why we started doing this a long time ago is, one, it's from Microsoft. And 2, it's available in the Microsoft Store. So it makes it easy for us to deploy it and have a nice persistent backdoor. The other thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is Windows Subsystem for Linux has the ability to mount the C drive of the host computer system and access all the files on the computer system. So that's just some of the reasons why we've been using Windows Subsystem for Linux. One of the things that sucks about WSL is some versions of Windows Server really don't support WSL 2 yet, which is kind of a bummer, but they do support WSL 1. But yeah, I think it's kind of weird. This is one of those stories where you see it pop up and you're like, really? Like we've been doing this crap for like 6 years now, and it's just now popping up?
Well,
Are you like saying that this quote from Black Lotus is not correct when they say that, to our knowledge, this small set of samples denotes the first instance of an actor abusing WSL to install subsequent payloads?
Yeah, it that is an incorrect statement.
Disappointment.
I'm sorry.
So WSL2 though brought an actual, it's Hyper-V really. So just for anybody, like at first it was like kind of a subsystem where it was kind of emulating a Linux environment. Now it's just Hyper-V. So when you do WSL2, you're actually running a virtual machine. But yeah, they're not scanning it, and yeah, big surprise if you ran a virtual machine. It's just it's like having built-in VMware workstation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
in your Windows.
And it works really well. And I think that Microsoft is talking more and more of building this in to the operating system moving forward. Like they want more tighter integration between Microsoft and the WSL or Hyper-V that you were talking about as well.
And don't forget Android apps.
Oh, crap. Yeah. We get pretty soon Android malware will start.
I can't wait. It'll be Android ransomware. Slow Java, but fun.
Yeah, the guidance they provided for like use proper logging, that goes to an article from like 2016. And it says right at the top, like we're not updating or supporting this content anymore. We're no longer updating this content regularly, so there's just that lack of guidance. So certainly some need for better guidance on what does proper logging and solving this entail.
I'm surprised they didn't say proper logging and patching. You should do those two things and get a firewall too. I don't know. That's almost like a tack on at the end. I know this being offensive, right? You get so excited about the offensive side, and then the person from Tom's Hardware or whatever place broke the story first that's interviewing him says, so what do you recommend to defend against this type of attack? Caught him completely off guard, right, in the interview. And they're like, deer in the headlights. And they're like, I like turtles. It's like proper logging, I guess. I didn't.
You're like, quick, find an article about proper logging.
How to uninstall?
I don't care. Use it.
How to uninstall WSL 2. That'll be it.
Yeah, that'll be the next thing. That should have been what they talked about.
Actually,
honestly, that is the answer. Do you need
it is.
Then don't turn it on.
Well,
for real, that should be a hardening.
Sorry, Ralph. You can.
I was just going to say that should be a hardening procedure. Like you should just, remove WSL2, and that should just be part of the process, right? So there.
Yeah, and you should have implementation for detecting if it is installed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep looking at this though. Anytime you recommend that, I'm like, but we're pen testers and we use it and we love it so much. Please don't make it go away.
Well,
it's all I had. It's all I had.
Yeah, on the defensive side, you look at, not just WSL, but that Windows Store, just for a lot of things that are deny listed in an environment, and you go, okay, but I can go over here to the Windows Store, load all the stuff in Windows Subsystem for Linux, and I can get past the deny list that you have in your environment and go, oh, what's that? I can't run Python. Oh, let me just load this through the Windows Store, and you allow it because it's Microsoft and it's WSL, and you go, I'm running Python now, and all of our policies and controls say I'm not supposed to be able to do that. I'm running Linux.
And the fun thing about the Windows Store is that when you install stuff from the Windows Store, it goes into a folder in program files that is only accessible by trusted installer. Like system can't even really see what's going on with it. Trusted installer is the only thing that can really see what's going on with the apps launched by the Windows Store.
And the other thing to keep in mind is every time someone uses the Microsoft Store, a bell goes off in Redmond. And they're like, someone's using our store. They're installing something on their Windows system instead of using Steam, everybody. And we're like, what is it? Oh, it looks like malware.
Oh.
We'll take it.
It's the same when someone opens up Edge, right? Every time someone opens up Edge, like, what? They're using it. It's happening. It's happening.
They're like watching them type, and it's like Google Chrome download link. Enter.
Which is funny because Edge is actually just Chrome now. They gave up. They gave up. They were just like, no. We pull. Yeah.
I do like. How many of you up and before the new version of Edge? Because I use it now on my Linux system and on my Windows system because it works really well. How many of you, for the longest time, that was the first thing you would do? Like as soon as you spin up a new VM that's Windows 10, you're like, okay, installing Firefox or Chrome.
Yeah.
I'll actually admit, John, like I hated the legacy Edge, as they call it now, so much that I would just go find IE and then go download Chrome.
Oh my god! That's
I preferred IE over the legacy Edge, so I wouldn't even open Edge when I first set up a computer. I would just go straight to IE. I'm like, the devil,
Oh,
so
that's petty, but I respect it.
Not to change everyone's process, but you should install Chocolatey first, right?
Yeah, that is
the package manager.
One of the things.
Yeah, it's the package manager for Windows, and then after that, you can just say Coco install Google Chrome or whatever it is, and then you never have to go chase it all down for the rest of your life. So,
although
pro tip,
there is WinGet in Windows now, which I love using.
NuGet.
NuGet, okay.
NuGet, okay.
Yeah, it's tasty. Yeah, it's like candy bars. You know how it goes, right? They all have to be candy. Yeah, it's a fact.
All right, so I've got the next story I want to talk about is U.S. to target crypto ransomware payments, and I want to start this out with a question. So, in 2 days, I'm going to a high school debate team, and we're going to talk about ransomware. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency, and the debate topic in high school is the United States government should be doing more to regulate cryptocurrencies, and I'm trying to get my head around. And even this article talking about it, U.S. to targets crypto ransomware payments. How? I mean, seriously, how in the hell And I'd love to get your opinion on this because I need to come up with an answer. Because whenever you're doing debate, you have to do pro and con. You have to be prepared for both sides. And for me, I'm like, one, this is stupid. Two, you can't control it. Three, it's completely designed that way to be decentralized. But on the other side, if I'm going to say, no, we should be actually going through and regulating cryptocurrency, how? Like, how the hell would this be done short of completely trying to shut the protocols down on the internet? So I don't know. What are you guys' take on this?
Yeah, that's the thing, though. It's completely, and I mean, I'll take the easy one because Ralph can handle the harder ones. He knows more about this.
Yeah, good call.
But like, it's from the ground up. It's designed like when they were making it, they were like, "Hey, what's a currency we can make that's not regulated by governments? That's not regulated by any one like authoritative body. That's our goal, and that's what we're going to try to make." And now people are like, well, how can we regulate this? And you can't. It was designed to not be regulated. Like, you couldn't.
Well, and you have people saying we should tax their cryptocurrency earnings.
Well, naturally, I mean, why? It's taxes. I mean,
how? It's like, Mr. Strand, we noticed that you had these 15 wallets that have this much cryptocurrency. And I'm like, wow, I was wondering where those wallets went. I don't know. Ralph, do you drop some insight on this, man? Because you're on the CoinSec podcast and you know more than we do. Like, explain, like, how the hell would you regulate this?
I don't know if you can. I don't think you can. From the tax debate, though, I mean, everybody has voluntary tax. Like, the tax law is the tax law, and it's all voluntary, by the way. Like, we just happen, if you get a W-2, they take it out. So, like, you're supposed to report, like, and you're supposed to know the rules. Like, that's your, responsibility. So, as far as the not paying taxes part, that's a law, right? Like, if you want someone to pay more taxes for money that they earn via crypto, then you would change the tax law, right? That's what it is. But it's your responsibility to do that, not necessarily technical controls. But as far as back to the original question, how would you actually regulate this? We don't. It's like Noah said it best. We don't. That it was designed to not be regulated in that sense, right? And any cryptocurrency that is under control over the government, meaning the government has like full control over it, nobody's going to want to use it. Just like the dollar. If the government, every time you wanted to spend the dollar, like, somebody came by and told you what to, I don't know. It's the whole point, right?
Like,
So,
let's say you succeed, hypothetically, if you succeed, then everyone's going to leave because it doesn't do what it's advertised to do.
Yeah.
Well, but I think some of the ways they could do is they could target the exchanges, right? And maybe try to get the exchanges to force, like, they have to actually like disclose tax documentation.
So they're already coming out with ways kind of so yes, the exchange is like the on-ramp, right? Think of it getting on the interstate. But once you're on the interstate or you have cryptocurrency of some sort, you can now exchange those in decentralized exchanges that don't require a company like Coinbase to make that operation happen.
I totally get that, but I think what they're banking on is that 98% of the population that's into crypto, they're going to be using those exchanges because it's easy. And you can absolutely off-road and you can do it on your own. And it's not that hard. Excuse me. But I think that that's one of the things that they're thinking about as a possibility. But I don't think that that's going to stop like these attackers like Revel. They're not going to be, well, crap, they got us. We have all of our stuff on Binance, so they got us. It doesn't work that way. It almost seems like they do not understand at a fundamental level like what a huge change this is. Whenever we're talking about cryptocurrency, they do not understand it. They somehow believe if they can legislate it, then automatically, magically, they're going to get tax dollars. They're going to be able to regulate it. But everything I'm reading about the United States government doing this, it shows me that they fundamentally do not understand the problem.
You want to know why Bitcoin is worth $40,000 right now? It's because you can't just turn it off. It's because you can't just regulate it. Like, those are the things that are like the point, right? And so to come in and just be like, you know what? I think we could fix this. It's like,
yeah. Well, I love some of the solutions, like creating a centralized cryptocurrency regulated by the government. Like you said earlier, that's the antithesis of what this whole thing is.
Go ahead and make it. See how well the adoption rates are on it.
Well, and Tom asked a question. I'm going to throw this once again. I'm going to throw this over to Ralph. Tom asked a question. Did Venezuela get it right or wrong with Bitcoin?
I don't know. From what I've read so far, it seemed like that was not necessarily like for the better of everyone like in the country. And honestly, my personal opinion about like Bitcoin as a form of payment is I think it's kind of horrible. It's kind of like, Internet 1.0, kind of like, Netscape Navigator and GeoCities, right? Like, it's kind of there and, it's kind of useful, but it's not nearly the same websites we visit today, right? And I think that Bitcoin as a currency for, instant trades to buy things, of small amounts, it's not super convenient, even though there are ways that they're trying to make it all work. But cryptocurrencies in general, yes, they're definitely going to be here to stay. And there's going to be, who wins, who knows. But Bitcoin by itself is not necessarily like super easy, right? Right off the bat. So
yeah, on the flip side of that, I can buy Chinese food from the local Chinese restaurant with Ethereum.
Yeah, that sounds good. Chinese food sounds really yummy. So another fun thing about these taxes, just a quick story. Craig Wright, for the people that are watching this, Craig Wright is running around telling everyone that he invented Bitcoin. And he may or may not have invented Bitcoin. There's very strong opinions on the side of saying he didn't. Even Dan Kaminsky, before he died, was kind of pigpiling on Craig Wright too. And by the way, Craig Wright is a friend of mine. I don't mind saying that, but I'm also going to say that Craig Wright is one of the most insane, weird friends that I've ever had. He has multiple sand certs, been around in circles with him for years. And one of the things that's interesting about Craig Wright is as soon as he came out and he said, I'm Satoshi and I created Bitcoin, all of a sudden the Australian government is like, wait a minute, if you own Bitcoin, then we know all of these wallets over here with this much money are yours. And you have this much money. And they actually like raided his house and all kinds of things. So, this isn't the idea of the government getting involved is not something that's far-fetched. Like it literally happened in Australia with Craig Wright. Now, to be completely honest, I don't know if Craig Wright created Bitcoin, honestly, because like I said, nuts, but really cool guy to hang out with. But honestly, so how do you tax that? Because if imagine that you're at the beginning of Bitcoin, right? And you're just spinning up all these different coins and you're mining and you're getting all this stuff. And you're just like using wallets, disposing wallets, getting rid of them, getting rid of passwords, because you're researching, you're developing, you're building this entire thing out. And somehow you amass these thousands and thousands and thousands of coins and they're worth nothing when you do it. And now all of a sudden today they're worth billions of dollars. And you don't have the wallets anymore. You don't have the passwords. You can't gain access to them whatsoever. Like, how the hell do taxes handle that, right?
Well, right now they're taxed as a like an asset, not a currency. So think of it just like a stock, right? So you bought a share of a company, and you actually don't pay taxes. By the way, I'm not an accountant, but this is what I understand. You don't pay taxes on that until you gain or realize a gain, or technically you could realize a loss as well, right? Meaning when you sell said asset, when you make money, then you would pay, an income tax on that. You would pay capital gains, which is the rich person tax, which is actually a bit less than conventional W-2, whatever taxes. So that's how we currently do it. That's United States. That's currently how we do it right now. And then to one other point that you brought up is that minus the losing of the wallets, which is a really interesting concept because you could be like, yes, I had that wallet, but I don't have the password. So I guess I don't have that money anymore. But because it's a blockchain, auditing it is super easy. It'd be TurboTax blockchain, right? Just plug in your addresses and it calculates it out. I mean, sorry to, buzzword a company that's probably going to do this, but yeah, that's it. I mean, it makes it easier. Yeah, it makes it easier.
Someone at TurboTax is like, I just got the best idea.
I know.
This is brilliant. Where did this come from? Nowhere.
TurboTax blockchain edition. It's going to be amazing.
No, wait for it. It's going to happen, and I think it's going to happen within the next 24 months.
So, all right, just to back to this article though, right? Just to like kind of bring it back around. So we are talking about, would this affect ransomware? Because I think the edifice for this is not just the taxing, but it's to like hopefully take away the payment system that these groups have, right? To do ransomware, so they'll stop doing ransomware. Is that what the article was about, right? Question?
Yeah. But I think that's the ultimate goal, right? The United States government is trying to find a way to stop this. And I think that they're going to quickly come to the conclusion, just rightly so, they're going to come to the conclusion that the only lever that they're going to have that they can pull is the lever that allows them to punish organizations who pay. And I'm terrified about whenever we actually get to that point where we basically start penalizing the victims. We never negotiate with terrorists, and your company got hit by ransomware and you had to go out of business. Well, thanks for taking one for the team. That's not going to stop ransomware, right? It's just going to basically make things harder in the industry as a whole. So I don't know. The government's trying to jump in. They're trying to do something about this. But once again, I feel like they have to do something, but they don't understand it. And to be honest, most people in the industry, even myself, I don't feel like I understand this at a level that I feel comfortable with. The idea of trying to create legislation around it right now at the early stage, I just think is a really bad call.
Yeah. I heard about cryptocurrency. I'm writing a law right now to fix it. I totally got this. I got it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what's happened. I heard a name on one podcast, and we got to fix it. And I'm the guy. I got
these experts, Ralph. I got these experts from TurboTax. They're really amazing at this whole cryptocurrency thing.
They invented the blockchain.
Yeah.
The other thing was, I said it before, John, but I'm going to say it again real quick. Like, even when we talk about penalizing private companies who pay the ransoms, like, realistically, the government has no historical precedent to be like, oh, you got hit with ransomware, just die now. I mean, it maybe for smaller companies, but what is it when it's a bigger company? What happens when a large auto manufacturer happens to get hit with ransomware, and hundreds of thousands of people are going to lose their jobs because they said, oh, I guess you just have to roll over and take it now. They're not going to do that. They can't.
Yeah, and they factor that into their calculations as well. If they go, we're down and we're losing X amount of money, so both the financial hit from fines and then also like the shame hit from sanctions, you go, or we just stay down and we start walking people out the door because we're down. People are out of business. We impact livelihood and just all the business stuff. You say we're losing millions of dollars per day by being down, or we can pay this, and oh no, the government comes after us. And do people care that we paid the ransom?
I just think it's interesting.
People want their money back. If it's a banking or financial industry, they're like, I don't care. Give me access to my bank accounts. Pay whoever you have to.
And another quick twist on it, just as a thought, what about ransom denial of service attacks? I mean, you're not necessarily down, but you either pay you either wait it out or you pay the ransom. Does that fall under the same thing where it's like, well, sorry?
I don't know.
Well,
should we go to Pakistan?
Yeah, we could just run on ransom all day, right? We just soak it up, dude.
Let's go to something different. We were talking about the true cost of insecure software and kind of the true cost of an insider threat. This is an AP news story. Man sentenced to 12 years in $200 million phone fraud scheme. So this is one of those interesting things where when you hear about it, you're like, holy crap. Someone did this and made money at it, and they didn't just make money, they made a crap ton of money at it. So whenever you get a phone from AT&T or Verizon and you're on that plan to pay off that phone is actually locked to your plan. And what this particular gentleman in Pakistan was doing was he was going through and bribing AT&T employees in a call center in Washington, and he was paying them. I think he paid something like $922,000 in bribes to AT&T employees so that he could unlock phones. Now, if you're thinking about this, is this a couple of phones? Is this one phone? No. Is this 10 phones? No. Is it 20 phones? Still have to go higher. I think it's something like 1.9 million phones were unlocked. And this scheme, they believe, cost AT&T $200 million. So if we're looking at this, the thing that I think is really, really, really funny about it is that's a big number, right? $200 million, but it covers a lot of different things, right? It's got the suitcase attack. Like, is your organization secure against a suitcase attack where someone just pays one of your employees a suitcase full of money to do something malicious?
The answer is no.
You have that insider threat where somebody's actually doing this, and this doesn't involve malware, right? This isn't an attack where they're like, load the malware on these computer systems. They were actually doing something that was actively hurting AT&T, and all of your standard security alarms and alerts wouldn't actually apply. And I think that this is important because it really calls upon us as security practitioners to understand more than just malware, credit cards, social security numbers, and really get down to understanding the business processes and how those things are audited. But yeah, he's going to prison. And there was a quote in here. I love this, where the defendant was basically apologizing. Over time, I became obsessed with money, and any thought that I was doing wrong just disappeared. I didn't know it then, but I was on a path of self-destruction. And it says, while he apologized, he did not go so far as to help the United States government recover any ill-gotten assets, he noted. They figure he made at least $5.3 million. So I know he's probably thinking right now he'll, stay in prison for a short period of time, and that money's going to be waiting for him once he gets out.
So I'm just curious, how did this
It's in Bitcoin?
Yeah.
The government regulates that.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has all of his money in Bitcoin, and that way he can get it when he gets out. So how was he doing this? So he would buy. I kind of get the unlocking part, right? And then he would sell the phone. So like it wasn't stolen, but it just wasn't paid for. And then he would convince them to unlock it so then he could sell the phone. Is that what was going on?
I think he was doing it as a service. Like the way the article reads is that it was a service online that you could like sign up and say, I had a phone from AT&T that I hadn't finished paying for all the time. I could just be like, all right, here's the IMEI number, and he could unlock it for me.
I mean,
and then they could switch from AT&T's network to a cheaper network. Is basically
or stolen probably phones were probably pretty hot with that one too.
Those margins are sick though. 1.9 million phones for $922,000, like $2 a phone for him to get them unlocked and bribes. Like,
and what
that's
of these
good numbers.
What of the other three that were involved in this? Like, there's 3 AT&T workers that are involved, and they're just not. They're barely mentioned in the article.
Yeah, they're not sentenced yet. So
yeah, they're not sentenced
also,
yet.
if you're AT&T, you want to bury this, right, Alex?
Yeah.
Like, you do not talk about the AT&T employees that did this. Like, just don't. We quietly fired them. Don't talk about it, because the more they talk about it, the more it looks like they have some responsibility on this as well, which I kind of think AT&T does.
And that kind of that also does some damage, because then you get companies that don't feel like insider threat is a problem because they never hear of insider threats being problems, because something like this, a story comes out, AT&T is burying their involvement. So you have all these companies that go, well, where is insider threat ever really a problem? Where do we have to worry about those suitcase attacks there? Because that doesn't ever really happen, or we would have heard about it. So this does kind of a disservice to never talk about the fact that 75% of the people at fault here were insiders.
So this gets me thinking about, just John brought this up just right now, just thinking about what if AT&T was involved, right? So what would be the motivation? Like, why would they care about this? Maybe they just needed to pump up the amount of subscribers they had, right? And these subscribers then left, and this was just like the tail end of it. I'm not sure, right? And then so they could say, hey, we put in a bunch more subscribers that all ended up leaving. The phones were a piece of it. Who knows? But
yeah. Speaking of insiders, did we talk last week about the NSA employees and the Hacker for Hire services for dark matter?
No.
I don't recall. I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we
I
did.
think this is a great way to kind of bookend the show, kind of close out with this article. So we opened with NSO Group. We're talking about writing exploits for iPhones, and NSO Group is buying those. Dark Matter is a UAE-based company, and they actually specialize in very, 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 very smart security people doing very, very, very shady things that normal people can't do. So think InfoSec magicians, and you're getting really, really close to dark matter. And I've got some good friends that work at Dark Matter, and they do some really, really cool work. But once again, this is kind of interesting because they tend to pick up people from like the NSA. They tend to pick up people that used to work for other pen testing firms in the United States. They hire incredibly competent people. And in this particular situation, you had a couple of people that worked for Dark Matter that actually were former NSA employees, and they actually violated export controls associated with requiring companies and individuals to obtain special licenses from the State Department Directorate of Defense trade controls before providing defense-related services to a foreign government. And these three men, they were all men, yes, these three men were actually writing 0 days for iOS. So they're writing tools Karma and Karma 2, which was zero-click exploits. So the reason why I bring this up is if you're actually doing this type of research, you've got to be careful who you're selling this to. Because even if you're looking at NSO is an Israeli company, and Dark Matter is UAE. And if you have those skills, you're here in the United States, and you worked with the United States government in any fashion, even if you were or were not writing exploits but working in security, you've got to be really careful in the skills that you take and where you take those skills whenever you go on the road. Also, this company also do stuff for the United States government. So it's like, that was bad when they did that there. But if they did it for us, it was fine.
Yeah, no, I was going to say this is pretty much one of those, they were playing for the wrong team, and this is the repercussions of doing that, right?
Wasn't Project Raven sent by the U.S. to the UAE to like establish this, and then Dark Matter born from Project Raven?
There's a little bit more to it with Dark Matter. Big strokes, sure.
Yeah, that was like the 2-sentence abbreviation, but yeah.
Yeah. So, but this does really, like, I'm wondering if this is a shot across the bow of Dark Matter. Like, once again, I haven't talked to anybody there about this specific thing whatsoever. But what's interesting for me is there's a lot of people at Dark Matter and other companies that are former NSA or intelligence employees. Is this kind of a shot across the bow? Like you said, hey, you're playing for the other team. That's not cool. Or it was cool whenever we said it was cool, and now we're very much saying it's not cool anymore. It gets confusing if you have these skills where you're going to do it. So I think that a lot of people are just going to be like, F it. We're just going to go to bug bounty programs or ransomware. We can make money doing that. We don't have to deal with it.
I mean, this is U.S. government, repercussions 101, right? So how do you affect somebody that you technically don't have control over? You do sanctions, right? And that's usually what happens. And, on top of that, you look into practices that are maybe affected by sanctions, or you produce sanctions and then get them in trouble for validating those sanctions, So yeah, that sounds like what we're dealing with here. For better, for worse, we don't obviously have all the details, but yes, we don't approve of what you're doing, and this is how we are telling you.
And this is the way they're telling you. It's like,
yes,
I gotta say, the United States government needs to work on its communication skills just a little bit here. The fines are ridiculous. $750,000 for one, for Mark. Ryan is at $600,000, and Daniel is at $335,000 that they have to pay over 3 years to avoid prison. Which I'm hoping Dark Matter steps in and covers those costs for those employees. But
yeah, either that or they're going to go into like some small room just developing exploits and hopefully making enough to pay it back.
You see Dark Matter being like, "Here's your chain. We're going to change it to your desk. And once you get us 3 exploits, we'll pay it off."
We need 3, big buddy. 3.
We need 3. But this also gets to the coal fire example in Adel, Iowa. Seriously, if somebody is working for you, I don't care what country you're in, if they're doing stuff for you and then they end up with fines or things like that, kind of think as a company you're sort of obligated to cover your employees and take care of them. It's just kind of my way of thinking.
Well, you may be a better person than these other people. Who knows?
Yeah, until it happens.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, John.
Actually, I have to tell you something.
I was on a meeting and I got a speeding ticket.
Fine, John. So I got you on the webcast saying that you'd pay for it. Like about that, Ralph. Yeah. I hope I have that strength whenever the time comes to do the
God, give me this strength. God, give me this strength.
God, give me the strength to bail my employees out when they get arrested. All right, everybody. Let's take it out. Ryan, thank you so much, everybody, for joining this week. We'll see you next week.